Pink Floyd had begun their career as an experimental rock group of the late 60s, one of the first bands of the British psychedelic movement. But by the 70s, the band had shifted directions to progressive, conceptual art rock under the newly assumed leadership of Roger Waters. In 1979, Waters and Pink Floyd would record and release their most ambitious project, a rock opera, The Wall. One track in particular holds a special place in rock history for the way it brought together progressive grooves and production alongside iconic rock sounds and provocative themes and lyrics. Not to mention a haunting children's chorus. That song is, of course, Another Brick in the Wall, Part 2.
Hey, teacher, leave them kids alone.
Hello there, it's Warren Hewitt here. I hope you're doing marvellously well. Welcome back to another episode of the series. If you haven't already, please subscribe. And if you hit the notification bell, you'll be notified when we have a new video. And if you're into production, you can go to Pt.2 and sign up for the email list and get a whole bunch of free goodies. Pink Floyd was founded in London in the early 60s, when several architecture and art students began playing music while attending school together. Guitarist and singer Roger "Sid" Barrett, bassist Roger Waters, keyboardist Rick Wright, and drummer Nick Mason formed the first consistent lineup of the group as they started gigging regularly together in 1965, building their name out of two blues musicians, Pink Anderson and Floyd Council. By 1966, they had combined their rhythm and blues repertoire with an innovative light show, establishing themselves as leaders of the progressive psychedelic scene in England. Their early performances and recordings were centered on free improvisations and songs written by Barrett. This can be seen in their debut album, The Piper at the Gates of Dawn, in 1967. But as the band's relationship with Barrett dissolved by the decade's end, they moved into new directions under the leadership of another founding member, Roger Waters. As the new primary lyricist and creative conceptual force behind the band, Waters pushed Pink Floyd in new experimental directions. The addition of David Gilmour on guitar in 1967 also contributed to this development in the band's sound and creative output. 1973's release of The Dark Side of the Moon kicked off what is often viewed as the band's classic period. Certainly, it is when they started to receive more international, and especially American, attention. The period also reflects the darker turn in Waters' own creativity, which he brought to the band. Themes of alienation, insanity, and death became recurring elements of his writing, epitomized in the band's 1979 double album, The Wall. A semi-autobiographical reflection on his own life, trauma, and success, The Wall is often viewed as a rock opera. The songs work together to tell a story of a depressed rock star, Pink, who falls into a nightmarish hallucination as he builds a metaphorical wall of isolation around himself. The key musical composition that builds this wall is, of course, the triptych of Another Brick in the Wall. Each part acts as its own song detailing a specific moment in the plot. Part 1 of Another Brick in the Wall centres on the death of Pink's father in World War II and the resulting overprotective parenting of his mother. The longing for a lost father is a plot detail which has a clear autobiographical connection to Waters, whose own father was killed during the war when the future musician was only 5 months old. The details of Waters' father's death were only recently discovered in 2013, and The Wall represents the musician's struggle with growing up without ever having known his father or even what happened to him. Waters later explained, "I was very angry because he was missing in action, presumed killed. Until quite recently, I expected him to come home."
Dad is flown across the ocean.
In the final part of Another Brick in the Wall, Pink's character devolves into a violent breakdown in which he completes building his own metaphorical wall, and thus his isolation from the world around him. But it is the middle section of the composition, Another Brick in the Wall Part 2, which has gone on to achieve a life of its own. In the context of the album's plot, It reflects upon the trauma of an oppressive school system and manifests as a haunting protest against educators who would suppress and control student thinking in an effort to force conformity on their generation.
Poems, everybody! The laddie reckons himself a poet. Absolute rubbish, laddie. Get on with your work.
Hey, teacher, leave them kids alone.
Walters first developed and presented his ideas and music demos for the wall to Gilmour, Wright and Mason in July of 1978. Wright later recalled thinking when he first heard the tapes, "Oh, here we go again. It's all about the war, his mother, and about his father being lost." It took the efforts of producer Bob Ezrin to get the band excited about the project. He took Walters' demos and managed to translate them into a coherent storyline for the band to read through before recording the album. He explained, "I ended up producing like a 40-page book that night. The next day at the studio, we had a table read, like you would with a play, but with the whole of the band, and their eyes all twinkled because they could see the album." Walters' demos for the wall began at Britannia Row Studio in London, a studio which Pink Floyd had built in 1975 after the completion of their album Wish You Were Here. They had used it to record their 1977 album Animals. In January of 1979, the band travelled to France to record much of the wall, working between Super Bear Studios and Studio Miraval. In September and October of 1979, production switched to New York's CBS Studios. Here they worked with conductor and arranger Michael Kamen and the New York Philharmonic to fill out the album's orchestration. The band also used Los Angeles Cherokee Studios and Producers Workshop to complete some of the recording and mixing of the album. When it came to recording Another Brick in the Wall Part 2, the initial track sounded, according to Mason, like a funeral, gloomy thing. Ezrin then looked back to his recent work at the record plant in New York, where he had been working with Niels Lofgren at the same time that a disco band, Chic, was recording in the studios. He suggested the band bring in a Chic-style groove to the track, a surprising and yet phenomenal juxtaposition of brightness against the dark, traumatic theme and haunting, repetitive vocals. Gilmour's funky and edgy guitar solo pairs the perfect sound with its now iconic groove.
What was your process for the solo in Another Brick in the Wall?
The sound of it was this gold top Les Paul. Ezrin wanted me to play it direct inject, i.e. straight into the desk without amps at all. All that stuff. After I'd recorded it, they liked it. Bob really liked it. But I didn't think it had quite enough meat to it. So I persuaded them to let me run it out through a DI box backwards into an amp in the studio, off tape. And then so it would come out through a guitar amp. And we added the guitar amp sound a bit to the DI sound.
The final touch, of course, is the addition of the children's chorus in a song which repeatedly declares, "We don't need no education. We don't need no thought control. No dark sarcasm in the classroom. Teacher, leave them kids alone." The power of adding children's voices to the sound of protest is undeniable. To achieve this effect, engineer James Guthrie sent the tapes to Britannia Row engineer Nick Griffiths with a request to fill in with youth voices. He explained, "We actually sent Nick a 24-track tape with a stereo mix of the song on 2 tracks and asked him to fill up the rest of the tracks with different performances of the kids. That way, we could have plenty of choices when making a balance, which we then transferred to a master tape. On one take, he put the kids into an echoey stairwell. I used a lot of that one in the mix. It really helped to increase the size of the chorus." So Griffith contacted the nearby Islington Green School, where he was lucky enough to find a music teacher, Alan Renshaw, who was equally as anti-establishment as the song's lyrics. Without asking for permission from the school administration, he brought in 23 students to the studio, under the agreement that the school orchestra could have some recording time there. Griffiths reflected positively on the experience. Everybody had a whale of a time. It took just half an hour to do. Then I tracked the voices about a dozen times. The effect was brilliant. Walters recalls the first time he heard the children's voices in the mix. I feel shivery now remembering the feeling of hearing those kids sing that song. So before we start talking about any guitar parts, I just met Bob Ezrin. Yep, I just met Bob Ezrin maybe an hour ago, and we got to talk about 20 minutes. And I told him, hey Bob, I'm making a video about Another Brick in the Wall, Part 2. So, there's a few things he told me. He told me that the disco groove they came up with first, the chic part that is driving the song, was very contemporary for the time and not something the band were necessarily into, but he was really strong on the idea. Then, of course, there's David Gilmour's great guitar part, the and that riff that's just really, really wonderful stuff. That was like the icing on the cake on this already kind of funky disco groove, that chic groove. This is the thing that really blew my mind. So they had the verse and the chorus, and that was it. That's all they had. So what Bob did is he took that verse and chorus and doubled it. Then the kids' choir sang over it. He said there was 22 tracks because, of course, there was time code, etc. So it was 22 tracks that he got back. And they were in the producer's workshop, which Clay Blair now runs, and they mixed it there. They had the tape sent over to them, and they mixed it there. So the song is structurally quite straightforward. You have David's incredible funky rhythm part. You have the riff. And then, of course, you have the chorus part, which is just a... That's it, just the F and the C. The only other thing that's added is Dave, in the pre-chorus sections, plays the G, but he just plays it as a triad. So it's a third, a fifth, and a root on the top. So you got that. Just really, really cool parts. All the while, on bass, Roger Waters is playing. It is the pinnacle of beautiful, well-crafted parts, great songwriting, incredible production. And speaking as a kid of that period, a little kid, hearing that song for the first time, it just spoke to a whole generation of people. Another Brick in the Wall Part 2 was released as a single on November the 23rd, 1979, a week ahead of the full album on November the 30th. Guthrie recalls the decision to release the song as a single. As the album took shape, Brick 2 was clearly the best choice for a first single. We were not trying to make it blatantly commercial, just a good groove. But the commerciality of Roger's chorus hook was already clear on his demo, and the school kids certainly helped. Ezrin, too, was convinced that the song would be a hit single. He explained, "I pushed it through because I knew it was an undeniable hit song. The band was not interested in singles, but that was the culture I came from, so I was determined to make it into one." The song hit #1 on both the UK singles charts and the US Billboard Hot 100 chart, as well as in several other countries, including Switzerland, Sweden, South Africa, Portugal, Norway, New Zealand, Germany, Austria, France, Finland, Ireland, and Canada. And in the top 5 in Italy, Netherlands, Spain, Belgium, and Australia. The response was powerful and lasting, although there was some pushback to the song's critical lyrics. Waters recalled, "People were driven to frenzies of rage by the song. They thought that when I said we don't need no education, that was kind of a crass revolutionary standpoint. But if you listen to it in the context, it clearly isn't at all." Despite this critique, the song's legacy has extended for decades, as has that of the album. In 1983, the song won a British Academy Award for Best Original Song for its appearance in the film version of The Wall. And the album was nominated for 2 1980 Grammys, Album of the Year and Best Performance by a Duo or Group with Vocal. Both the song and the album have cemented the band's legacy as one of the most creative forces in rock music history. In 1996, they were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and in 2005, they were inducted into the UK Music Hall of Fame. Wow, what can I say about this song and this album? I was a little kid. I remember it vividly. There wasn't a single kid in my school that didn't sing, "We don't need no education." It was just so popular. In 1980, it was still like punk/post-punk. New wave was around. Ska was still around, two-tone. There was a lot of like angular kind of, frankly, almost sort of anti-proggy music, anti-classic rock. It was all like youthful, edgy music. The pop charts was dominated by Adam Ant, Ant music and stuff like that. But then comes out this song. Every single kid bought this song. I didn't know anybody who wasn't singing the song at school. It was huge. I then went out and bought the album. I saved my pocket money for a few weeks because it was a double album, and I can't remember what my pocket money was in those days. It was probably 50p, and I doubt very much if The Wall was 50p. It was probably a few pounds. So I saved up my money for a few weeks. I bought the album on vinyl. That was all there was available. We didn't really have cassettes in the UK like you did here, like you did in America. But anyway, so I bought the album on vinyl. I remember recording it onto a cassette so I could listen to it in other environments. But ultimately, it was just such an incredible album. But the song to this day just stands up as being, I don't know, everything I personally love about music. Great songwriting, incredible lyrics, amazing production, incredible performances. Everybody in the band is just nailing it. The guitar solo is iconic. The groove with the disco feel against this kind of down, 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 this kind of like tough rhythm section. I mean, wow. It doesn't get much better than this. I mean, Pink Floyd as a band have so many incredible songs, so many incredible albums. And just to top it all, I was at Earl's Court and I saw The Wall. All my hairs are standing on end just thinking about it. I got to see them do The Wall. It was incredible. And I went to go and see the movie with one of my first, might have been my first girlfriend. I remember we're going up to London and going to Leicester Square and seeing it with all of the surround sound. So when the Stuka goes over, it goes over your head with all the speakers. I mean, what a time. If you're a Gen Xer like me, you must just remember being a little kid and growing up with this. It was so powerful. What a great time to have music thrown at you as a kid. Unbelievable. Thank you, Pink Floyd. Thank you. Just incredible musicianship, incredible everything. Song, lyrics, production, performance. Anyway, you can tell I'm a fan. So long, farewell, auf Wiedersehen, au revoir, adios. Hope to see you again soon. Please have any comments and questions below. If there's other songs, other bands, other artists you want to see in this series, please put them down below. Thank you ever so much. Goodbye.